Hi, this week is week 10, which actually starts on the 2nd of October, although it has been open for a little while and many of you have already started on this week's topic, which is fine. And the others may have been taking a bit of a break. We have been busy marking, and I'm hoping that we will be able to get the marks out to you by the end of Monday. Sorry, no, not by the end of Monday, by the 5th, if not a little bit before. We will provide you with some specific feedback, and I'm thinking about doing that as a video and also integrating it into a help video for the next written assessment. And that is coming up. That information will be available in week 11. Now, one thing I did want to talk about was the student satisfaction surveys. You may have received them, and if you haven't, you will very shortly. I strongly encourage you to complete those. We share that information with each other and we use it to make changes to our subjects, but by talking to other lecturers and subject coordinators, your feedback for this subject could also influence what's happening in another subject that you will do. So please don't feel that there's no point giving feedback for a subject you've already done. There is, because, as I said, we share that information and we try to make things better for students. So I have made a lot of changes to this subject based on your feedback, as in the feedback of previous students. If I only hear from those students who are not very happy, then I may make changes to things that are actually working quite well, which is often a significant concern to me. So whether you have had a good or a poor experience, I really need to know what your feedback is so that we can continue to improve this subject. As an example, the timing of the assessments has changed based on previous students' feedback. You may find that you don't like 2 written assignments in a row, or it may suit you so that you don't have a written assignment due in exam week. I won't know unless I hear from you, and if I only hear from one of you, then it doesn't really tell me what's working for the majority of students in this subject. Okay, so having said that, let's talk about adult and community living. Now, as you know, having studied the NDIS, the services and support systems for people with disability, not just people with developmental disability, but all types of disabilities, are changing. So we have to keep that in mind, because how these services are provided will change, and maybe sometimes some information that you read, even though it may not be very old, could be a little bit it could be a little bit outdated, in the sense that things are changing so fast. And that certainly is true for supported accommodation. People under the NDIS will no longer be waiting for accommodation from a particular disability service. And housing is a major issue under the NDIS, because people may not have alternative accommodation to go to. So that's a piece of work that's happening within the NDIS and also with governments. But they may be able to include in their package disability support. So an individual who may come in and support them to live in a household with people they've chosen to live with, which is, as you remember, a key feature of the NDIS, having choice and control over aspects of your life. The relevant intended learning outcomes for this week are to identify and describe the capabilities of people with varying degrees of physical and or cognitive disabilities and identify the supports they require, to describe our guiding principles, philosophies and values. And many of you are able to describe them, but may struggle a bit to apply them, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And to compare the roles of various allied health and human services professionals in supporting people. And many of you are getting an understanding of those different roles. Some of you are seeing those roles in a very narrow, from a very narrow perspective. This week we'll consider the concept of quality of life and the difference the practice of direct support workers and others involved in the day-to-day lives of adults with developmental disabilities can make to their quality of life. The focus is particularly on accommodation options for adults who move out of their family home, and an evidence-based staff practice known as person-centred active support. It's a way of providing support to people who live in supported accommodation. And there's some really interesting and exciting research that's going on through La Trobe, which I'm involved in. So person-centred active support enables people with intellectual disability to be engaged in meaningful activity and in social relationships. It tries to address the problem that has occurred both in institutions, which have largely but not completely gone, but even in supported accommodation where people are left to just sit without any real meaningful engagement and have no real quality of life. This week highlights some paid staff who may be involved in the life of a person with developmental disability. It also highlights the services that allied health and human service professionals may be either working in or with, so it gives you an idea of the various roles you may have as a future professional. So they might undertake roles such as case management, training, resourcing, advising, consulting, managing or evaluating. Many of the staff who provide direct support and services have certificate rather than tertiary level training. That is, they may have TAFE rather than university training. And their knowledge about the support needs of people with developmental disabilities may be quite limited. In many respects, they rely on health and human service professionals for specialist advice about support and leadership of their practice. And as a future professional, you could be providing that type of support. Now, this week also provides some additional material on the social model of disability. And the reason we've provided is that some of you can describe the social model, but you don't really seem to understand how to apply it. So if you find that in your assessment feedback, you've gotten comments such as, look, you seem to be focused on Tricia having to fix herself. That's Tricia from the scenario, which was placing responsibility for change on the individual. That is not the social model. That's the medical model, where people have to somehow overcome their impairments through therapy or whatever. The social model is about how do you reduce the effect of their impairments, so by changing things in their environment and how people interact with them. So I'm hoping that the extra information for this week provides that missing understanding or addresses that missing understanding that some of you may have. Okay, so this week you'll watch a mini lecture that I did about supported accommodation, clips demonstrating person-centred active support, and a video on community living. You'll read an extract from a book about active support and reflect on examples of the social model and how they apply this model to a particular scenario. Hopefully you will engage in forum discussion about how the subject is going for you, but more specifically, whether or not you thought about adult and community living, and also if you've watched a great video that we've included in the Go Further. I encourage you to have a look at Dreamhouse. Most students who watch that video really enjoy it and make lots of comments on the forum about that. As always, the Go Further section has lots of resources and they will be really useful for you in your next assessment. All right, I hope you enjoy this week. Thanks.